Nearly 200,000 cans of green beans are being recalled by the FDA.
What if the can of beans you opened tonight, the one you thought was safe, cheap, and dependable, was actually a silent trap waiting to poison your family? Across America, government inspectors have quietly flagged shocking dangers hiding inside trusted labels, from seams that split open and breed botulism, to shards of metal and plastic waiting inside your dinner. Tens of thousands of cans have already been recalled in recent years, but here's the frightening truth. Millions more remain stacked in cupboards, unseen time bombs with expiration dates stretching years into the future. How many seniors on Social Security are unknowingly buying these cans because they're the cheapest option left? How many families in food deserts are forced to shrug, "It's just beans," only to find out later that a single bite could send someone to the ER? And the deeper question, why are corporations allowed to gamble with our lives, treating our kitchens like their laboratory? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Tonight we expose 7 canned bean brands that experts say America must pull and destroy at all costs. Though don't worry, we'll also reveal safer choices so you know what can truly belong in your pantry. Number 1. Yellowstone beans. Right now, as you're watching this, thousands of families across America may have a silent killer sitting in their cupboards, disguised as a cheap can of beans. It's the urgent reality unfolding across America as of May 2nd this year, when the FDA announced a sweeping recall of more than 4,500 cases of Yellowstone brown sugar molasses baked beans. Produced by Vietti Food Group in Nashville and shipped into 23 states, these cans were sold through trusted outlets like Walmart, Hy-Vee, Meijer, Associated Wholesale Grocers, and KVAT food stores. They weren't just pulled for a dent or a misprint. They were yanked off shelves because they contained undeclared soy, an allergen that can stop someone's breathing cold. Picture a senior at a Sunday meal spooning beans onto his plate, never suspecting that the next bite could collapse his throat and send the family scrambling to dial 911. The horror cuts deeper when you see the expiration date, February 17th, 2028. That means these cans can sit unnoticed in pantries for years, masquerading as harmless pantry staples, ready to trigger deadly reactions at any moment. For people with soy allergies, there's no cushion, no warning, no forgiveness. And here's the cruel twist. These beans had already spread across nearly half the nation before the recall notice surfaced. How many seniors living on fixed incomes, how many single parents depending on SNAP benefits, will overlook that bulletin because survival means stretching every dollar and making do with whatever sits on the shelf? Isn't this exactly how danger sneaks into kitchens? Under the cover of affordability, Vietti Food Group is not a stranger to this game of roulette. Past mislabeling scandals and contamination blunders show a pattern that feels less like an accident and more like an operating model. Roll the dice with human health, apologize when caught, then march forward as though nothing happened. It's as if they see customers not as people, but as disposable chips at their corporate casino. They refund a few cans, issue a tidy press release, and trust that shoppers will be too tired, too broke, or too overwhelmed to resist. And in truth, many are. Who has the energy to double-check every ingredient list when your Social Security check runs out by the 15th of the month? That's the psychology that makes this betrayal especially vicious. Beans aren't luxury items, they're survival staples. They're the protein filler when the fridge is empty, the comfort food when stress levels peak, the cheap and safe fallback when no other choice exists. People convince themselves, it's just beans, what harm could it do? That little shrug, that whispered bargain with reality, is exactly the crack in the wall corporations exploit. And while shoppers shoulder the risk, Vietti keeps cashing in. Isn't this less about food and more about a system that counts on our exhaustion to keep profits rolling? And what about the future? If Yellowstone can't manage to print their correct allergen label, what's next? Plastic fragments floating in the sauce, bacterial outbreaks sending kids to emergency rooms, or even contaminated supply lines slipping across borders unchecked. Their products already flow through retail giants with vast distribution chains, so one slip instantly floods millions of pantries. Will the next scandal dwarf this one? Will regulators keep letting apologies stand in for accountability? Or will families keep paying the price until enough lives are ruined that action becomes unavoidable? Yet even in this bleak reality, choices exist. Some brands, like Bush's Best, have maintained stricter allergen control and publish audits to prove it. Organic producers such as Eden Foods take transparency more seriously, offering beans with clearer origins. And for those who refuse to play corporate roulette altogether, dried beans soaked overnight cost less and reveal every ingredient right in your own pot. That's not just cooking, it's reclaiming control from companies who gamble with your safety. So here's the question that should haunt every kitchen. How many Yellowstone cans are still tucked on shelves, waiting to turn a budget meal into a hospital bill? And when you reach for the next can you honestly say you still trust it won't betray your family? Number 2. Good and Gather beans. Picture this. You're reaching for a can of green beans, the kind of dependable side dish that has seen generations of American families through lean years, the potlucks, and Sunday suppers. But instead of a safe meal, what you're holding could be a disguised weapon, a fiberglass grenade in the pantry. That's not paranoia. That's exactly what Target and Del Monte Foods Inc. unleashed in February 2025, when nearly 200,000 cans of Good and Gather cut green beans were recalled. The official number, 8,242 cases, or 197,808 cans, stamped with a Best By date of October 28, 2026. They were spread across 21 states, from Florida to Ohio, sitting innocently on shelves in the places retirees and working families shop most. Inside some of them, foreign objects, metal, glass, even plastic, waiting like hidden blades for the unlucky bite. The recall was classified as Class 2, a phrase that sounds clinical but boils down to this. You could end up in the hospital, gasping or bleeding because a store-brand bean sliced your throat or shredded your stomach lining. Try to imagine waking at 2 in the morning, choking because dinner carried a shard instead of nutrition. It's the kind of bureaucratic understatement that insults the people actually at risk. The paperwork says medically reversible consequences, but the real translation is pain, fear, ambulance sirens, and bills you can't pay. And the betrayal isn't just physical, it's emotional. Good and Gather is Target's own brand, the label plastered across shelves to convince you they've curated safety for your family. It's like trusting your mechanic to fix your brakes, only to find he left a wrench rattling inside the wheel. Del Monte, the supplier, didn't just miss a few cans. Nearly 200,000 made it through. That's not a fluke. That's a system failure. And Target, with its polished aisles and red bullseye logo, stood there smiling while shoppers loaded these cans into carts, believing they were safe. Why do people keep buying? Because they have to. Because when you're clipping coupons and counting social security checks, you choose the store brand. You tell yourself, it's just beans. What harm could it do? That little shrug is the exact pressure point corporations exploit. They know you'll silence your doubts because hunger leaves no room for hesitation. And so families carry these cans home, unknowingly stacking tiny landmines beside the rice and pasta. Looking forward, the dread multiplies. If Del Monte can't keep plastic shards out of beans, what happens when a can slips through with botulism spores sealed inside? What if the next error is a chemical contaminant invisible to the eye? Target can issue apologies and refunds, but apologies don't stitch wounds or pay hospital bills. So the looming question isn't whether another recall will happen, it's when and how catastrophic it will be. Will the next one merely threaten dental work, or will it bury loved ones? And here's where shoppers need to think about alternatives, because trust is already broken. Libby's whole green beans, backed by stricter quality checks, offer fewer surprises in every bite. Eden Foods, with its organic, farm-sourced beans, demands a higher price but promises a clear chain of custody, or you can sidestep the system entirely. Buy fresh beans, blanch, and freeze them yourself, trading a little time for complete control. Because in this warped marketplace, your safest choice might just be elbow grease instead of blind faith. So now the question gnaws at every household. How many cans of Good and Gather are still lurking in pantries, ready to turn a simple dinner into a trip to the emergency room? And when you crack open the next lid, can you truly believe it won't betray you? Number 3. Randall Beans. A can of beans is supposed to be the loyal old neighbor of your pantry, quiet, reliable, and always there when you're stretching dollars. But back in May of 2021, Randall Beans ripped off that friendly mask and revealed something closer to a mailbox stuffed with a poisoned letter. Headlines blared that 1.6 million cases of their beans were being recalled due to a botulism risk. Not a flavor problem, not a dent in the lid, but the most dreaded toxin known to the dinner table. Clostridium botulinum. The culprit? A production failure at their factory. a non-functioning temperature gauge that failed to bring cans to the heat needed to kill the bacteria. That wasn't a tiny glitch. It was a broken smoke alarm in a burning house. Botulism isn't some garden variety bellyache. It's paralysis, respiratory collapse, and in many cases death if you don't get treatment fast enough. Now think about where those jars ended up. Walmart, Sam's Club, Kroger, places where working class families and retirees buy bulk food because it's cheap, dependable protein. Imagine serving what you thought was a safe, comforting meal, only to discover you had unknowingly dished out a silent assassin sealed inside glass. That's not dinner. It's Russian roulette with a spoon. And here's the twist of the knife. Those jars carried best buy dates stretching all the way into 2025. That means even today, some could still be sitting on pantry shelves in American homes, patiently waiting to betray. The failed temperature system at Randall's plant wasn't just an error. It was the corporate equivalent of driving blindfolded down a highway and praying no one gets hurt. And when a company can't even guarantee that beans. A food as old and basic as civilization itself. Are properly cooked before sealing, what trust is left? It's one thing to water down quality, it's another to gamble with lives. This scandal is more than just jars on a recall list. It's a snapshot of how low-income families are cornered. Beans are cheap protein, a fallback when paychecks don't stretch. People shrug. It's just one more can, what harm could it do? But what if that shrug sends a grandfather to the ICU? Hooked to a ventilator because a broken thermometer let death slip inside a jar? That's the cruel psychology. Normalcy lulls us into denial while corporations hide behind it. The future doesn't look kinder. If one faulty gauge can scatter lethal toxins across the country, what about the other machines quietly failing in factories right now? How many safe labels are stamped on faith alone, while regulators trust paperwork instead of proof? Is Randall's disaster a one-off, or the visible crack in a much larger system rotting from inside? And yet shoppers aren't powerless. Some brands have taken food safety more seriously. Eden Foods, with its organic canned beans, puts its sourcing and audits out in the open. Amy's organic pinto beans come from smaller, traceable operations with reputations built on accountability, not shortcuts. Or you can bypass the industrial wheel altogether. Soak dried beans overnight, season them yourself, and know exactly what's in the pot. It's cheaper, safer, and tastes better, like tending your own garden instead of tearing open a mystery envelope. The joke writes itself. Trusting Randall Beans back then was like trusting a self-driving car to stop at every red light, until the day it doesn't, and you realize too late you were barreling through disaster. So the haunting question remains, how many other trusted pantry staples are quietly ticking toward expiry with dangers no label admits? And when you twist open the next jar, will it nourish? Or betray everything you thought you knew about safety in a supermarket? Number 4. Goya beans. Goya has long sold itself as the soul food of the Americas, stamped proudly across grocery shelves for generations. For immigrant families clinging to tradition, retirees rationing fixed checks, and working-class households trying to stretch one meal into two, Goya is supposed to be the safe, steady friend at the dinner table. But what happens when that friend slides a knife under the tablecloth? That's exactly the creeping realization with Goya beans. Because behind the glossy marketing is a mess of recalls, lawsuits, political firestorms, and labor controversies that make every bite feel less like nourishment and more like betrayal. The food safety record is the first crack in the facade. Goya has been tied to repeated recalls involving stones, insects, shards of metal, and even bacterial contamination strong enough to make cans burst open like miniature grenades. The FDA has logged complaints, and families have filed lawsuits after opening cans to find foreign debris where beans should be. Imagine preparing rice and beans for your grandchildren and fishing out a bolt instead of a bean. The company insists such cases are rare, but what comfort does that give when you're the unlucky one staring at metal on your dinner plate? A lottery ticket might be a fun gamble. Dinner should never be. And then comes the politics. In recent years, Goya's, Utes, leadership loudly aligned with polarizing national figures, turning an ordinary grocery purchase into a referendum on ideology. Shoppers who once trusted the brand suddenly found themselves caught in a cultural tug-of-war. Keep buying and swallow the politics, or boycott and break with decades of food tradition. For older Americans on limited incomes, the message was cruelly clear. Choose between your values or your wallet. What should have been beans in a bowl became beans as a ballot, and many longtime customers felt abandoned by a company that valued political theater over household trust. The supply chain story doesn't rescue them either. Reports have flagged low wages for workers in packaging facilities and questionable sourcing practices abroad. Consumers who imagined they were supporting a proud, multicultural success story discovered something closer to sweatshop economics dressed up in bright logos. Each may as well carry an invisible disclaimer, packed with shortcuts and exploitation. That realization stings even harder when you realize the brand sells comfort and community while extracting value from the very workers and shoppers it pretends to celebrate. So why do people still buy? Because Goya has entangled itself with tradition. In bodegas and corner stores, especially in food deserts, it's often the only option. Shoppers tell themselves, "It hasn't hurt me yet, so it must be fine." That quiet shrug, that mental bargain, is how dangerous systems survive. It's no different from ignoring the rattling sound in an old car. You pretend it's nothing until the engine gives out. Complacency keeps shelves stocked and corporations unchallenged, even when families know better in their gut. Looking forward, the outlook is grim. If Goya continues cutting corners and politicizing its brand, a bigger scandal feels inevitable. What happens when a contaminated batch sickens thousands across multiple states? What happens if another boycott leaves shelves full but communities hungry because alternatives were never stocked? The instability doesn't just threaten public health, it threatens the fragile balance of food security for those who depend on canned staples most. How many more recalls, how many more controversies before shoppers realize they've been playing with fire? Alternatives do exist, though they require breaking habits. Bush's Best has maintained a tighter safety record with fewer recalls. Whole Foods' 365 Everyday Value line offers organic beans without political baggage, and for those willing to reclaim control, dried beans, soaked overnight and seasoned at home, deliver the cheapest, safest, and most transparent option. It's more work, but it's work that keeps power in your kitchen instead of handing it to a corporation that has repeatedly gambled with trust. So here's the haunting question. How long will America keep excusing stones, metal, politics, and exploitation inside their beans just because of nostalgia? And what calamity will it take for the blindfold to finally slip off? Number 5. Bush's Beans. Bush's Best has long been the golden retriever of the canned bean aisle, literally with Duke the talking dog wagging his tail in commercials that make beans look more like family fun than factory food. For decades, shoppers trusted Bush's as the southern neighbor who wouldn't dare serve you anything unsafe. But behind that friendly grin is a corporate reality that's anything but neighborly, recalls hidden in fine print, cans that risk poisoning families, and a production system that prizes long shelf life over genuine safety. Take the recalls. Few people know that tens of thousands of cases of Bush's baked beans were yanked from shelves because the side seams of the cans could split open. A split seam isn't a cosmetic issue. It's an open invitation for botulism, a bacteria so lethal it can paralyze or kill in hours. Imagine hauling out a stack of Bush's cans for a summer barbecue, thinking you're saving money when in reality you could be serving a toxin deadlier than any spoiled meat. For retirees stocking up in bulk or low-income families filling cupboards, that's a betrayal hiding in plain sight. And it doesn't stop with defective cans. Reports have flagged over-processing and heavy chemical preservation in Bush's beans. Shoppers joke that the cans could outlast the apocalypse, but the bitter truth is that they're embalmed long before they reach your plate. What value is a pantry full of beans if they've been stripped of nutrition and padded with chemicals that stretch corporate profits instead of nourishing bodies? The Dog and Smile branding also hides ugly sourcing realities. Bush's supply chain has been tied to pesticide-heavy industrial farms and low-wage labor exploitation. Behind Duke's wagging tail sits a machine that squeezes both soils and workers dry. For older Americans who remember when beans came from small farms and family recipes, that realization feels like a generational lie. A reminder that the secret recipe was really efficiency and shortcuts all along. So why keep buying? Because Bush's mastered trust marketing. People see the mascot, hear the jingle, and equate it with safety. Nostalgia does the heavy lifting, while consumers unknowingly roll the dice on their health. And the scarier part? The bigger the brand, the bigger the fallout. One future slip in Bush's production line, whether it's pesticide residues, contaminated cans, or more foreign objects, could hit millions of households in one sweep. For families who've had enough of smiling betrayals, safer paths exist. Eden organic beans remain reliable. Trader Joe's house brand beans consistently test cleaner, and dried beans from co-ops or bulk bins put control back in your own kitchen. They take more prep, yes, but they don't carry the same gamble. And here's the question every shopper should chew on. If even America's friendliest mascot is quietly risking your health, how many more jingles will you swallow before you finally say, no more? Number 6. Heinz Beans. For more than 100 years, Heinz has sold itself as the smiling blue label of trust, the pantry staple that promised comfort no matter how lean the times. Bance Mayen's Heinz was more than advertising. It became a cultural lullaby, passed from one generation to the next. But beneath the nostalgia lies a darker story. Heinz beans have carried recalls, contamination risks, and labor scandals that turned comfort food into betrayal food. The cruelty cuts deep because the brand wrapped itself in memory and family tradition, only to lace those very cans with danger. Take the recalls. Heinz has faced scrutiny in the United States for can seam defects and spoilage risks, the perfect breeding ground for Clostridium botulinum, the same bacteria that causes botulism, one of the deadliest foodborne illnesses known. Across Europe, regulators have forced Heinz to pull cans from shelves after finding metal fragments and plastic pieces mixed with the beans. The image of beans simmering gently on the stove suddenly twists into something grotesque. Bits of machinery hidden in your family dinner. And then there's the human cost. Investigations into Heinz's supply chains have uncovered exploitation of migrant laborers, working long hours for pennies to produce the beans that end up in American kitchens. It's a bitter irony. A multi-billion-dollar corporation building wealth on the backs of exhausted workers, while selling cans to retirees and working families under the banner of wholesome tradition. Each spoonful is less nourishment and more a reminder of systemic abuse. Even the healthy choice marketing is deceptive. Nutritionists have slammed Heinz beans for sky-high sodium and sugar levels, far beyond what's safe for seniors with high blood pressure or heart conditions. Eating these beans daily is less about protein and more about priming your arteries for collapse. Yet the commercials keep smiling, selling sweetness as strength and masking the medical bills their product may one day create. Why do shoppers keep reaching for Heinz? Because branding works like hypnosis. Generations grew up humming Heinz jingles and stacking those cans in cupboards without question. For many older Americans, buying Heinz is less about logic and more about habit, a reflex tied to childhood meals. That's the trap. Loyalty built on nostalgia, even when the record shows danger. And the future? Heinz's global sprawl makes every failure more catastrophic. A contaminated shipment from South America or a defective plant in Europe can ripple across millions of cans worldwide. Regulators are already overstretched. How many recalls slip through before headlines arrive too late? The bigger the brand, the bigger the blast zone when something goes wrong. Alternatives don't carry the same baggage. Pacific Foods organic beans provide lower sodium with transparent sourcing. Simple Truth Organic, Kroger's own line, balances affordability with cleaner ingredients. And for those tired of rolling dice, dried beans from farmers markets or bulk bins give complete control over what lands on your plate. Compared with Heinz, where each can feel like a gamble, the safer path becomes obvious. So here's the chilling question. How many more families will mistake Heinz for tradition when what they're really swallowing is a century of shortcuts? And when the next contamination scandal arrives, as history suggests it will we still call it comfort food or finally admit its betrayal sealed in a can? Number 7. Van Camp's Beans. Van Camp's has been around since the Civil War, wrapping itself in Americana like a faded quilt. Cowboy suppers, Sunday cookouts, and Depression-era survival stories. For older Americans, the name still hums with nostalgia, the idea that these beans saw us through hard times. But memory can be a dangerous mask. Today, Van Camp's beans carry a legacy not of comfort, but of repeated recalls, hidden health risks, and corporate shortcuts that betray the very families who keep buying them. It's less heritage food and more heritage negligence, sold cheap because the real costs are hidden in hospital bills. The recalls alone are damning. Van Camp's has been tied to multiple Class II withdrawals over understerilization, with inspectors flagging defective seams and risks of bacterial growth. Botulism, the word that still makes regulators shiver. was on the table, and tens of thousands of cans had to be pulled from shelves across the Midwest and South. A can seam is supposed to be the lock that guards your family's health. Van Camp's seams turned out to be the lock you can pick with a paperclip. You think you're safe until you're not. Nutrition watchdogs have also torn into the brand. Instead of simple beans, many Van Camp's varieties come laced with high fructose corn syrup and sodium levels that rival a greasy fast food meal. For retirees managing blood pressure or families already weighed down by medical bills, every can is like a Trojan horse. Beans on the outside, slow sabotage on the inside. Marketed as hearty, protein-packed meals, they're really salt bombs dressed up as dinner, nudging people closer to the very conditions. Heart disease, hypertension, that make healthcare unaffordable. Behind the label, the labor story is equally grim. Van Camp's supply chain has faced criticism for underpaid workers in processing plants and unfair contracts with bean farmers. Yet the commercials still play on nostalgia, selling grandma's kitchen while quietly squeezing modern workers dry. It's the same old corporate trick, sentimental marketing on the front, exploitation in the back. Why do people still reach for Van Camp's? Because it's often the cheapest can on the shelf. When Social Security barely covers $1,200 a month, or when a parent is stretching 2 jobs to feed 3 kids, brand loyalty is irrelevant. Survival is the only metric. People sigh, look at the price tag, and whisper, "It's just beans." That shrug is the lever Van Camp's counts on, knowing economic pressure will keep families swallowing risks along with dinner. And the future? It's hard to imagine stability, with food safety audits already revealing cracks across the canned industry. Van Camp's seems poised for another blow. Will the next headline warn of E. coli outbreaks or lawsuits over deceptive health claims? At their scale, even one slip could poison not dozens, but hundreds of thousands of households. The danger isn't abstract, it's math. Alternatives exist for those willing to step away. Amy's organic chili beans deliver safer flavor without hidden syrups. Field Day organic beans, common in co-ops, keep sodium lower and sourcing transparent. And bulk dried beans, bought cheap at Aldi or Winco, give you control over cost and seasoning without gambling on factory seams. It's more work, but also more certainty. So here's the real question. How long will we let nostalgia blind us to danger? When the brand our grandparents trusted is the same one sending grandchildren to the ER, do we keep clinging to memory, or finally choose safety? When the brands we trusted turn toxic, the only defense is awareness. Subscribe now and demand truth before another recall strikes.
Thanks so much for sticking with us to the very end. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our daily updates. And now feel free to check out some of our latest and most popular videos showing up on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next one.